We're getting ready to celebrate our 80th vintage this fall, and next year will be our 80th anniversary. We're also celebrating 100 years of winemaking in California. We've become one of the oldest family-run wineries in California. We are certainly in the Santa Cruz Mountains the oldest winery.
Making wine in northern Italy goes back at least 4 generations, if not more.
And our father always claimed that our winemaking tradition of the family goes back 300 years. Giuseppe, the first Bargetto to leave the little town in the Asti area, Castelnuovo Don Bosco, he left in 1890. And then later our grandfather in 1909 traveled here.
My grandfather spent a few months in San Francisco when he first came from New York. He never saw the light of day when he worked in the world-famous Flytrap restaurant in San Francisco for 3 months. And he would go in before the sun came up and go home after the sun went down. After 3 months of that, he'd had enough of that and he wanted to get to a little more rural area and try his luck making wine on the banks of Soquel Creek.
The original winery was in San Francisco, founded in 1910 by our great uncle Philip Bargetto, called the South Montebello Vineyard and Wine Company. And he operated it with his uncle, who they called Barba Giovanin. And in Piemontese, that means Uncle John. And they ran that winery after the earthquake and before Prohibition came. Bargetto Winery here on this property was founded by our grandfather and his brothers, John and Philip Bargetto.
They actually bought this piece of property in 1918.
Our grandfather's sister, Angelina, was living next door. So really it's Auntie Angelina is the reason we are all here in beautiful Soquel.
Absolutely.
And then started Bargetto Winery December 5th.
1933.
Even before the winery was founded in 1933, the two brothers bought a property up the road here in Soquel, and it was about 50 acres. So they were in some ways farmers before they were winemakers here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It was mainly cherries, and Soquel was famous for cherries back there, and plums.
I think there's still a few residual Zinfandel vines up there that they uncover once in a while when they're clearing away the brush, according to
If not,
people.
that'd be good legend. I kind of like that story.
Old vines in.
Old vines in. Yeah, and it's a good entree to talk about our cousins. They were a part of it, certainly as much as we were, and now they have their own winery, Soquel Vineyards, up the road.
That was our grandfather's ranch. So they've bought that property, part of it, and that's where their vineyard and
So it's come full circle.
Full circle.
You were involved with the ranch that your father and my grandfather had in Soquel years ago.
That was an orchard. And half was cherries, half was apples or plums.
How many acres was the ranch?
52 acres.
The winery started off in a barn, and this was the section of the winery, dirt floor, no electricity. And recently, when we took down some of these old casks, we exposed this old tree trunk, which was the corner post for the building. This is a little remnant of the old winery, which came from the old barn. A few years after the winery was founded, Philip died, so they only were working together in the winery for about 3 or 4 years. So then John was operating this winery and he was running the ranch. By the time the war came, he said, "Basta così," enough of that, and sold the ranch. And of course, for decades afterwards, we'd always say, "Oh my God, they sold the ranch." All those great grapes we could have been, growing up there through the decades.
There were grapes available. Lots of relationships with local growers, from the Beauregards up in the Santa Cruz Mountains and Bonnie Doon area to the Locatellis.
Vine Hill was a critical vineyard too, up along Highway 17 back then with the Riesling, and made some wines that really won some awards, and I think helped express the quality of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Eventually, his two sons, our father Lawrence and our uncle Ralph. Ralph returned from the war in 1945. Both graduated from Santa Clara in 1949. And now there was, that great feeling of optimism and desire to grow. So my grandfather said, "Okay, let's go." And he made the biggest addition to the winery, which included this room. And they went and bought all these old tanks from Petri Winery in San Francisco. Redwood that you can't buy these days. The wood from those tanks you see in the La Vita room. This room was filled with tall redwood tanks and lots of oak casks. But we replaced it with stainless steel tanks that have refrigeration, and what our grandfather would have given to have one refrigerated tank that you just turn on the switch to cool down the wine, because they spent lots of hours cooling the wine in the middle of the night during harvest time. We have nice natural solar light coming in with our skylights.
So this room was kind of the storage room with redwood and oak casks, and the room right next door was the fermentation cellar. So if you can imagine a big 8-foot diameter open top redwood tanks with a plank over the top. And the way that they did that in the 1940s was to get a big punch. I remember very vividly losing my balance and going into the tank and grabbing onto the side. And it's kind of dangerous because there's a cap of CO2, and if you hit that and took a big breath, you would just collapse. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and I got two friends to help pull me out.
Those tanks were in use all the way through 1985. And thank God we don't have to use those anymore. So Ralph and Larry worked together from, let's say, 1949 upon graduation until about 1964, when Ralph went into real estate. He had 10 kids, okay, we had 5 kids, and there just wasn't enough sales of wine to feed all those mouths. And then our father was able to take over the reins of this business, I guess because of that decision.
We're still here.
We're still here. So we all grew up. This was kind of the family business. I marked my beginning when I was in 4th grade, and I worked in the summertime, and we put in a retaining wall system along the back of the winery. Just this past week, in preparing for La Vita, I came across that old retaining wall. And then with time, I worked in the cellar and I worked in the retail room, and then went to UC Davis and studied enology.
I also, probably about 12 years old or 15 years old, washing bottles because we recycled our bottles. Then later on in high school years and college years, I always worked in the office. I got a business degree in accounting.
And when we need a check, we still have to go to Sister Loretta to get a check.
Well, I started when I was 6 years old picking up cigarette butts in the parking lot. I studied viticulture at UC Davis, and then my role here currently is the president, so I do a lot of the finance and the marketing and some of the admin. But very soon, we're pleased to announce that my sister is going to take over the title of the presidency of Bargetto Winery, so we're very excited about that. Good goal is to become more retail and hospitality right here in our backyard.
Our roots go back to hospitality and winemaking, and we do the blend, the marriage. So my hope and focus would be to create a better place here at the winery to make it more fulfilling and to have more fun events. To continue going forward, being a family-owned business.
Oh, yeah.
That's crucial. That's who we are. That's our history. And that's where we've been, and that's where we want to go.
Yeah, we hope it continues as a family business, and that's one of our long-term goals as well.
Probably every Christmas and every Easter celebration, we'd always come back to a couple issues. When are we going to get a vineyard, and where's it going to be? And we were looking all over Kingdom Come, everywhere from Boulder Creek and Bonnie Doon to the hills of Soquel. And then we finally settled on that property out in Corralitos. Here we are at Regan Vineyards. It's May 30th, 2012. And it's very appropriate that we're out here this month of this year, because this same month, 20 years ago, 1992, is when we did our first planting of 10 acres of Chardonnay. So this section is our first section for which we're really celebrating the anniversary this year, because this was the section that was planted in May of 1992. And this is a special clone of Chardonnay that we call the Mount Eden clone. And it comes from Corton Charlemagne in Burgundy, France, and it's one of the most sought-after Chardonnays of the world.
After 4 years of John talking about a winery needs to have a vineyard, this dream is finally come true.
I just wanted to say that so overwhelmed with the number of people here that are able to make it. And we will cover that little sleeve completely. That guy will be down in the ground. You guys gonna last the whole day out here? It's about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, we'll make it, don't worry. I think we'll have it all planted before nightfall.
5 months after the initial planting of this Mount Eden clone Chardonnay, that is where the Merlot will be planted this coming February.
It's breathtaking. It looks like there's velvet covering up the rows between the vines.
Terrific group, about 30 devoted planters, mostly veterans from last year.
Very excited.
Fun day.
And can't wait for that first glass of Merlot.
About 1997.
And here's little Kevin, sleeping peacefully. Someday we'll get him out here to help dear old dad picking the grapes.
This site is bellissimo.
It is something.
This is almost reaches the heavens. We are picking the Mount Eden clone in Regan Vineyards, and this is our first picking. And these are the grapes in the bin.
We are now harvesting a record crop of beautiful Merlot out here at Regan. Symbolize the fact that we are sustained from vintage to vintage, and we take the previous vintage of Merlot and pour a little bit into completed picking of the Pinot Noir, which was done 2 days ago. Now this is the very first harvest of the Italian varieties. Look at these cluster sizes. The Dolcetto, you ever seen clusters like this? First bin of Nebbiolo. Moving down. We've more or less completed the fourth planting section of Regan after 7 years from when we started planting. So life is good. A good day here at Regan. So it's 3.5 years later, and this is what section 4 looks like. We've had this dream about having a proper place for the partners to be able to come and enjoy Regan, and to be able to have a proper place for hospitality. So years later, this dream is becoming a reality in the name of a gazebo atop the water tank.
Lush green leaves and the dark, vibrant colored grapes. They're a great combination. We look forward to enjoying them in the wine.
A beautiful year for Pinot Noir.
John, this year in Pinot Noir is excellent.
This is the Dolcetto, growing here, sweetening up. We're probably about a week or so away from harvest. Here we are 20 years later. The vineyard is completely planted. We have almost 40 acres and we get 4 tons per acre on a really good year. You start to talk about 150 or 160 tons of grapes. So that's significant for our region. As far as I know, it's the most diverse vineyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We have 7 different varieties and 13 different clone combinations. That's really allowed us to expand the production, ship more across the country, and let people know how this region is really wonderful for producing terrific wines. We have 4 different clones of Pinot Noir. And what we've learned in recent years is the most special, the most unique wine in the Pinot family out here is the Mount Eden clone Pinot Noir. And a few years ago we grafted to get a sense of it, and we made a wine and we found it to be fantastic. And now we've grafted 2 more acres of Merlot to Mount Eden Pinot.
Every year with the vineyard is finding what works and doesn't work. We're a lot less Merlot now. The Mount Eden clones, cuttings from Mount Eden vineyard over in Saratoga, and that's proving to be really at home at Regan.
And when I think about Regan, I think about the Reserve Chardonnay when we get the grapes ripe. I think about the Dolcetto in a real unique year. And now I think about this new clone of Pinot Noir for us, this Mount Eden. But just yesterday we found out not only did we win a gold medal at the LA County Fair, but we took best of class.
We've been bottling the Mount Eden clone as an individual wine, but we do also do a Santa Cruz Mountains Pinot Noir, which is a blend of the Dijon and the Pommard and the Mount Eden. We do also Reserve Pinot Noir, and that's usually predominantly Mount Eden and maybe Pommard. And we also have, say, Dijon, Pommard, Martini clone and Mount Eden clone. Each year provides us with different things, and the constitution changes each year.
We're here in the gazebo and we're overlooking what I call the high rent district. This is our La Vita section. And when we first got started in the vineyard, I wanted to have an Italian white. And for me, it was Pinot Grigio. And so we planted 2.5 acres of Pinot Grigio. And then we've planted 3 Northern Italian reds. One of them is the Nebbiolo. We have 2 different clones that comes from Piemonte. It's the great Barolos and Barbarescos of Northern Italy. And this is Dolcetto. So we have 1.5 acre Dolcetto. We've expanded it. And it is the cornerstone of our La Vita wine blend because it brings a lot of fruit, a lot of depth, a lot of color, and a lot of intensity. So then on the other side, we have 0.5 acre of Refosco. And Refosco is a Northern Italian red variety from the Veneto area. And it is the deepest, darkest, inkiest red that we grow out here.
The Refosco is always usually the last grape we harvest. We plant it because it's part of the heritage of the family, and it does work well in the blend.
What's fun about these Italian varietals is we really were pioneers. There was really no one in the Santa Cruz Mountains growing these Italians. So these 3 together yield the La Vita wine, and each year the blend changes.
And we always blend La Vita to be the best.
And this year we're going to be releasing the 2008 La Vita. And I'm very excited, and I think that's maybe the best La Vita wine we've had so far. Each one's a little unique, just like the La Vita wines.
Cheers to La Vita. I was there on that first planting many months ago.
Enjoying the new La Vita room. It's beautiful. Can't wait to have several parties in there throughout the year.
This is the fun part of the wine business. You know, we can enjoy wine with friends and laugh and relax on a Sunday afternoon.
I really wanted to pursue it, and here we are now, going to college next year, studying wine and viticulture.
It's definitely a family affair, as you can tell.
And Mom has been to every La Vita release since the beginning, so 11 times. So she has a perfect record. I have my opportunity to welcome you two to our 11th release of La Vita. The 08 La Vita comes from our vineyard in Corralitos. It's a blend of 3 Italian varietals that we grow there, Dolcetto, Nebbiolo, and Refosco. It's our longest aged wine, 2.5 years in barrel and then another year in the bottle. Last summer, we got one of the winery's finest awards at the California State Fair, which is one of the leading wine competitions. Out of all the Italian blends, they picked out the 06 La Vita as the best Italian blend in the state of California. So we thought that was pretty good.
To the Bargetto family.
Cheers.
Saluta.
Here we are at my grandparents' house that they built in 1950. We're here looking at not all of the awards we have through the years, but we just sort of picked out a few highlight awards. And in the old days in California, in the 60s and 70s, it was the LA County Fair, which really was the major wine competition in the state of California. And in the good old days, they used to give you real silver medals. Here's a couple awards that go back to 1963 on Zinfandel and Zinfandel Rosé. And then here's a real gold medal, Zinfandel, and one here on Zinfandel Rosé. In 1975, I know my father was real proud of this one because Bargetto Winery won the highest number of gold medals at the LA County Fair. One of the most significant awards we received through the decades was on this wine, the 1981 Napa Valley Cabernet. And it was a very special wine to our family because it was a dedication to our father. The Wine Spectator picked out 10 Cabernets that year, and the Bargetto 81 Cabernet was included in that top 10 list. Perhaps the single most significant press we ever got from a wine writer is this one given to us for our 1987 Santa Cruz Mountain Chardonnay by a guy named Robert Parker. He gave that wine a 93-point score. And then in recent years, we've had a nice run at the state fair. All three of these wines come from our estate. In the Merlot competition in the state of California, we were given the best Merlot in the state of California. This was on the 2007 Estate Pinot Noir. They picked out the Bargetto Reserve Pinot as the top Pinot in the state of California. And then we have what we consider to be our most unique wine, our La Vita, which is our Italian blend. And the 2006 vintage last summer was identified as the best Italian blend, or sometimes called Cali-Tal blend in California.
We have three brands, La Vita, Bargetto, and Chaucer's. My father introduced those in 1964. We had plum trees, and he had trouble selling the plums that year, so he decided, heck, you know how to make wine, why don't we make wine out of these beautiful Santa Rosa plums? So that was the first wine that we made from fruits other than grapes. And then from there, he experimented with all kinds of different fruits, blackberries, boysenberries, peaches, pears, pomegranate. And at some point, he also tried fermenting honey, and that's been a successful part of the Chaucer's brand now.
The Chaucer's mead has become the bestseller and maybe the best-selling mead in the country.
For Bargetto Winery. 22 years ago, I moved to Santa Cruz. We source a lot of our grapes primarily from Santa Cruz. So we have Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and then we have our Italian varietals, which go to La Vita. We also have a Cabernet from Saratoga, from Peter Martin Ray Vineyard. If you start with good grapes, the idea is just to let them do their thing naturally. This is our 2010 Zinfandel. This is from one vineyard, the Schmira vineyard, just outside Lodi. Some of the vineyard is also over 100 years old. But it produces a really good, as you can see, rich, fruity, jammy, bold Zinfandel. This is a barrel of Merlot from Regan Vineyards, a state vineyard up in Santa Cruz. This is a French barrel. We buy a mixture of both French and Hungarian barrels, and also American. I mean, certainly I'm a believer of French oak, totally for Pinot, though American is very good for Zin and Petit Syrah. This is the 2010. So it's coming along nicely. This will be bottled later on in this year. It has a nice kind of dark blackberry fruit quality to it, as well as the kind of smoky oak flavors. There's so many nuances with winemaking, from when you get the grapes to the wine. There's lots of pathways you can take, and each of those pathways can bring about a change. So like if you want to press early, or you know, ferment a little bit longer, or leave things on the skins, these all add a little nuance. This winery started, as you probably know, in 1933, the day that Prohibition was repealed, and still going. And it's something that's got, you know, a little, it's part of the fabric of this area, and that it's nice to be working for somebody, you know, somebody or somewhere where this has, you know, a bit of history.
Here we are, 2012, Springtime is warm, sunny days. We see lots of clusters. We're seeing bloom and set out here. So we are feeling good about this year. And we hope it continues on and we can have our 20th anniversary with a good harvest.
As we begin to embark on our 80th anniversary, I stopped today to think about all the people who have gone before us, all the previous employees, and contributed so much to keep this family business going. So I thank all of them, and I thank all of you, because you guys have worked so hard, and you're just part of this history going forward.
A couple dreams for the future. Our land is all planted. We're maxed out almost at 40 acres. But you ask about the future, we do have a hope that at least one of my 3 children will be interested in the growing of grapes and winemaking. And I always tell them, I don't care which one, but as long as there's just one. And yes, there's a lot of hard work, but there's a lot of satisfaction and a lot of fun too.